doing, guys? Today we turned on the air compressor so we could do some work. And what we're going to do is we're going to field strip this little transmission, which will either go into the carpet cut or we'll donate parts in order for the carpet cut to get back in action. Now, I've been told that these are peerless transmissions. I'll be honest with you, I'm not a aficionado here when it comes to these kinds of little transmissions. It's in the peerless style. A lot of race tractors, like my brother's, has the peerless transmission with the slide selector for the gear selection, and not necessarily a stick selector. This does have a set of shift forks in it, so you know, I'm calling it a peerless transmission. But in the comments below, if it's not, or if you know what peerless model this is, please put a comment below. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to pull the shifter top off, and then we'll separate the top case. With the top half of the case off, as you can see, this thing has had a lot of water in it at some time. The gears are frozen. The shift fork is frozen also. There's a series of snap rings. There's one here, and then there's two on the other side. I'm going to go ahead and take those off and see if I can press out or get the shafts out of the case, so that way I can get the gear sets out and we can kind of take a look at the gear sets, take a look at the inside of the case. There's also seems to be 4 screws here that hold all the shift forks down. I'm going to try to take those out and see what we can do. If I have to put a little bit of heat to it with my torch just to warm it up, just to get things flowing and moving, I'll do that. But let's let's see what else we got going on. As I said, I'm not an aficionado of these transmissions. This is actually the first peerless style transmission I've ever worked on. So you can see, as I said, it's fully it's fully crapped up with water. I did take off the snap ring and I started to push I thought the shaft just came out, which is not the case, because this particular gear right here is pinned to the shaft. So I was able to get it out over, I was able to move the shaft enough until this gear struck this gear, and then obviously it just went solid on me. So I'm like, how's this thing together? Then I noticed that there was like aluminum with steel. So I'm like, wait a minute, does this thing press, just kind of sit in the case right there? So what I did was I just lightly tapped it with my brass punch and hammer, and sure enough, this thing comes out. So I'm learning as I go. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to lift this gear section or gear layout up and out. I'm going to get this one up and out, and we'll have the empty case in theory. So that's exactly what happened. I just lifted the gear clusters out. I did start to excuse my expression, I started to take the dog shit out of the bottom of the case, but I'm going to go ahead, scrape this down, get it cleaned up. There is a key that is a Woodruff key, it appears to be, here in this shaft, as well as a snap ring. So going to get the Woodruff key out, try to get the snap ring out so I can get the main shaft out of the case. And once I do that, then I'm just going to clean the case, get the little bit of gasket off it, get rid of all that stuff, and tackle the top. So the lower case is completely stripped down. We got the main shaft out, or the input shaft out. I got to clean it up and run it through the parts washer. As you can see, the top part of the case I did have to heat up with the torch. It's cooking off. These 4 bolts that hold I guess the shift forks in place, they were pretty frozen. This one here, right there, that was the stubborn one. But I got them all loose. We're going to pull that apart and take a look at the upper case. Have the top case completely field stripped. The threads where those 4 screws that held down the shift forks. I was a little nervous because they came out really galled, like the threads were just packed with corrosion, and that really, I was like, oh man, don't tell me I blew the threads out or took the threads out with it. But you probably can't see it on camera, but going down into the threaded holes here, because this is where the detent balls are, it's fine. They're fine. They look good. I'll just run a tap down them, maybe, just to make sure they're clean. The rest of the case itself is in real good shape. It's nasty, obviously, so I'm going to scrape that down. I'm going to run the cases through the parts washer to get those set up, get those clean and ready. And then I'll start tearing apart probably one or the other of the gear clusters. Got the lid in the parts washer. As you can see, I've already cleaned the lower section. Unfortunately, right there, one of the corners of the shaft hold down of the lid broke off. Now, this was already bent down. I don't know if I'm going to be able to show you. You can see that the corner of it is pushed down. And when I was washing it, I was trying to think. I was like, hey, you know what? Maybe I'll just heat it up with my torch just to soften it up a little bit, and then put it in the vise just to straighten it out, because it was bent down. Well, as I was washing it and looking at it, it decided to just fall off. So, oh well. So that means to make it mint, I might have to take the green top off the other transmission. I don't know yet. It really, like I said, again, it's immaterial to the situation. One thing that is material is the main input gear that actually goes through the case here, the bottom of the case. So this gear rides in that position. The lower section of the transmission's in near mint shape. There's really nothing wrong with it. It cleaned up really nice. I could do a little bit more cleaning. It does need a new O-ring on the bottom where it would seal for the grease from coming out. But the input shaft, this is the first gear I decided to take a look at, and we have an issue. If you see right here, I'll put it at the 12 o'clock position. There is a fracture in the gear. It goes all the way down between the tooth, all the way to the base, and I'll put it back at the 12. I'll put there it is. You can see it right, you can see it right there at the 12 o'clock position, roughly. There's a line. So this input shaft is junk, so we can't use this. I mean, I'll save it, but I'm not going to use it on the tractor. Hopefully the main input gear and shaft on the other transmission on the tractor itself will be good. We'll swap that over. So right now, preliminarily, we're going to use probably this base because the one on the tractor has a broken bolt in this position. This one, all the bolts came out fine. The bushing's actually in great shape. But we'll probably have to take the input shaft out of the other transmission and put it in this base. And then as I go through the gears, we'll pick and choose the best gears. But for right now, these parts are cleaned. And let's continue with I'm going to clean the top, and then we'll jump into the gear clusters. With the gear case base and this particular cluster gear taken apart and cleaned, I am finding there is some damage to the gears. There's no chipped teeth, but there is a lot of rust pitting because of all that water that was in it. I just loosely slid it all back together and dropped it into the case. As you know, I slid the input shaft back in, but as I showed you, it's got a fracture in it. So as of right now, my plan is to use the lower case because it doesn't have a broken bolt. I'm going to hope that the actual input shaft on this transmission is in good shape, as doesn't have a crack or anything like that in it, but we'll probably use the lower shaft out of that, as well as we're going to have to pick and choose the gears out of this particular transmission to fix or replace the gears that are in there. I have the other shaft, cluster shaft with the slide gear. This is the slides that engage these, like there's like teeth right there, or like a nub on the gear itself. We'll take a look at that once I get it all cleaned up. But I did find a broken piece of snap ring in the base of the case, and it's actually right there. It must hold all this stuff together. So we're gonna have to I have to replace all the snap rings. They're pretty much junk, but I just thought that was interesting because I was like looking at it going, where did a broken snap ring come from? I think I can't find it. It's in here somewhere. It's in this mess somewhere. But I did locate a broken chunk of snap ring, and I found where it was. It came from right there. All right, let me continue to slide this thing apart, and we'll get it cleaned up. So the slide shaft or the output shaft, whichever way you want to call it, because the slides for the gear engagements are on this shaft, as well as the shift forks fall onto the shaft. But essentially you have the outer shims, the main bushing that holds it in the case. You have one of the gears. There is what it looks like a 3/16 key that's actually, corresponding with the shaft. That's where the slides on that. There is a snap ring, which this one is busted. It goes right about here, I believe it goes. There's a shim. The shim is worn out and rusted. Then the gear. Then there's a spacer. Then we have another gear. We have another shim. Another broken snap ring. We have another key that goes right here. And then we have another slide. We have another shim. And snap ring right there. Shim, gear. Then we have the case bushing and another set of shims, which hold up against this particular snap ring. So kind of a neat setup. Obviously light duty, but really kind of cool. I'm going to go ahead and clean all of this stuff up. Just loosely slide all the gears back on the shaft so I don't forget where they go. Drop it in the case. So this gear case is been all pulled apart. It was frozen when I started. It's all been pulled apart. It's all been 90% cleaned, and I just loosely threw everything back in the case so that way I just kind of remember where everything goes. Next up, I need to remove the green gear case out of this tractor and blow it apart, and we'll kind of pick and choose the best parts to make the best transmission. The green transmission is out. It actually was very easy to take it out. I did have to take the deck off, which surprisingly was easy. And number two, I'm very happy. The deck is actually in great shape. There's only one of the bolts that hold the deck on that's a little bit messed up. We'll fix that, but there was I had to take the deck out. These 4 bolts were from underneath. Took those out, took the pulley off, transmission came right out. The little chain guard unfortunately does have an injury. I didn't do it, it was there, so I may just tack weld a piece of steel on there and grind it, re-drill it, so that way it looks real nice. But the chain guard, is there. There's the lower pulley. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull this transmission apart. With the cover cracked off the green gear case, the gears themselves look great. Now, unfortunately, the lower case is kind of messed up. Somebody jammed a Healy coil into this particular hole, and as you can see, this has been blown out. It's broken, probably over tightened. And the thing that's kind of interesting, there's some undue or weird wear marks on each one of the shaft collars, I guess you call them, or the bushings that hold it in the case, which we don't see on the orange transmission. All these are in pretty nice minty shape. So right now we're going to use the lower section of the orange case. We're going to use the the shaft bushings. Clearly the gears in the other gear case here are in much better shape. So I'm going to take this apart in a second, but I want to see if there's an indication as to why it pops out of third gear in the cover, because the slides, all this stuff looks like it's in really good shape. Now granted, I haven't taken it apart yet, but everything slides. There's just what I would consider normal wear. All the gears look good. So let me pull that top piece apart and let's see what's right out of the gate. We do have a missing bolt. One of the 4 bolts that hold the slide forks in place is MIA. So Let's pray that the threads are okay, but if I had to guess, there was a butcher into this transmission at one point in time, so we'll see what happens. With the shift fork assembly removed, I learned a couple things. One, only 3 of the 4 screws were in place. The second thing is 2 of the screws were like stupid loose. Like no force. There was only 1 screw really holding this all together. The detent balls look like they're in good shape. And luckily, all of the threads in the case look good. So I'm going to go ahead and reuse this particular case cover because, number one, it's green and I like it. Even though somebody did hog out one of the screw holes a little bit big, it doesn't matter. The orange case has a broken ear, so we're not going to use that. It's just going to look cool. So I'm going to go ahead and throw all this stuff through the parts washer, and then we'll think about inspecting everything and doing a reassembly. I pulled the gear shafts and clusters out, and I noticed this little tiny thing right there, and I'm like, well, what's that? Now, I already dug it out, but let me show you. If we reach in, look at that. It's the 4th screw. So I took one of the gear shafts apart, and all the gears are in great shape. I don't see anything visually with initial review that there's an issue with anything. Everything does look really good. I figured out why this looks kind of worn. It's not. It's machined, and it's machined for an O-ring. So you know, as a seal, all the shafts on this particular transmission, the green one, that's how it is. The input shaft from the green one is, I would call that almost mint, like darn near mint. So this will get used, obviously. Obviously, all these gears are going to get used. I think the only thing that caused the issue with the 3rd gear pop out is that one of the bolts was missing and 2 of the bolts were loose of trying to hold the shift forks in place. This is the screw I mined out of that gear lube, and you can see it's all chewed up. It's obviously got clipped by the gears at some point. Somebody must have heard that thing and said, oh, you know what, I'm going to keep on driving because they're brainiacs. But anyways, at the end of the day, it looks like the only main part that's going to get swapped for the green transmission is actually the base. The base is going to go gone. We'll use the base of the orange transmission because that one's in real sweet shape. So we'll just swap out that. And then everything else appears to be in great shape. So that's it for this video, guys. I'm done for today. Next video, we'll have everything all cleaned up, and then I will go through an actual physical reassembly process of this transmission. Now that I've figured out how it would come apart, I can put it back together, hopefully. All right, guys. Thank you for watching. Thank you for your viewership. Like, share, and subscribe if you could. And until we get to working on this or that, you have a great day.